welcome back to another Midnight Movie Reviews. I'm Vincent.
Raven Shadow.
And tell them the epic journey we just went through.
So we just watched a movie called The House That Jack Built, which is a film by a guy named Lars von Trier, who I had heard of. I was familiar with some of the stuff he had made in the past. I hadn't really watched any of it, but I was sort of aware of the kind of movies that he made. And of course we've done movies similar to this and the other reviews, where we've looked at movies sort of that have like this art house sort of quality to them. A couple of was the A24 Studios,
Like The Lighthouse.
The Robert Eggers movie, and Hereditary, the Ari Aster movie. And so this is kind of similar to that in the sense that it's not only is it a very artistically made movie, art really plays a big part in the plot. And by the way, sorry that we haven't put this is the first review we've done in a little while, and if you guys remember from when we did Fallen Down, part of us doing that was I had not seen that movie he had, and so the next pick was going to be me showing him a movie that he had not seen that I had. And so we watched The Wolf of Wall Street and we did a review, but just to be completely honest, we weren't really satisfied with it. If you guys want to know our thoughts on The Wolf of Wall Street, you can put it in the comments, or we'll at some point maybe talk about it again. But I sort of abandoned that idea for right now. At some point we'll come back to that and I'll show him something. But I came across this movie on Hulu, and again, with having heard about it and sort of being familiar with the filmmaker a little bit, I thought, this would be an interesting thing that neither of us have seen to try to talk about. So, and I'm glad we picked it.
I had never seen it before. I've actually seen nothing by this director, so I was coming in pretty fresh to it. I had not even heard of this movie. I take that back. I think I might have heard the title in passing, which is, it's a fairly common phrase anyway.
It's a Metallica song.
Yeah, I mean, but it's, I feel like I might have heard the title in passing, but never knew anything really about the movie. And right off the bat, I mean, this movie starts you almost in the same territory of Falling Down, where you're introduced to your protagonist, so to say, or let's just say our main character, played by played by Matt Dillon, character of Jack. And at first, you sit there, and I've never seen a trailer to this movie, so I knew nothing about it. I'm sitting here watching, I think, okay, he seems just kind of like a normal, awkward guy, and he picks up this lady played by Uma Thurman.
We didn't know it was Uma Thurman.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell it's her. It's not like it doesn't look like her or anything, but for some reason...
Yeah, it didn't dawn on us until later on.
Yeah.
But, just to set the scene, she's just really annoying, and she honestly makes you more nervous than he does.
Yeah.
And this isn't really a spoiler because this happens within the first 3 minutes, but she's just really bugging him, and
she's broke down on the side of the road. Well, she's not really broke down. She has a flat tire, and he just happens to pull up and seemingly to check on her and see if everything's okay. And she's very demanding about him helping her out, and he tells her that there's a garage 5 miles or so up the road, that they might have a jack. We'll get into.
Well, it's to repair her jack.
Yeah,
she
has a jack. She asks him if he has one. He says no, but the jack that she has is broken, and it just so happens that the guy that runs the garage is a blacksmith and can possibly fix the jack so that she can replace the tire on her car. So she sort of goads him into giving her a ride. She pretty much just hops in his vehicle and expects him to drive. So he does it, and of course he gets there. They fix the jack. He comes back, tries to change her tire, breaks the jack again, and of course there she goes being demanding yet again, demanding another ride back to the garage for it to be fixed again, just being very generally annoying. And it reaches a point where, like, you know, you as an audience don't like the woman, and you're not really sure if you like him.
But he seems like the level-headed guy in this situation. He's just getting irritated.
Yeah, he's more relatable than she is.
Yeah. And so out of nowhere, just smash her in the face.
Smash the jack right over her face. Because I think she
says she keeps joking that he looks like a serial killer, and he seems to take offense to it. But then she says, "No, I don't think you would be
too much of a wimp to be a killer.
Yeah, you're too much of a wimp."
And that's what makes him slam on the brakes and kill her.
Yeah. So instantly you're thrown into the movie. I mean, so you got a twist there within the first, like I said, the first 5 minutes, and from the beginning to there, you know, there's probably some little symbolism going on because it keeps focusing on the jack sitting between them, but you don't really know what exactly is going on, and it's from that point on this movie actually we jump into the plot. Yeah. So
and as soon as her death occurs, like, the movie really kind of sets up what you're about to see. And was it at that point, or was it? No, it was before. When you hear the voiceover of him speaking to this character named Virgil, who is a
Verge,
or he calls him Verge, who is you get the impression he's a priest.
It sounds like he's in a
confessional booth.
Yeah.
And he's telling him, and of course you don't see this, you just hear it. But he's telling him, okay, like, I'm going to give you an account, 5 different incidents that have occurred over the past 12 years of my life. And he says, I'm not going to necessarily tell them in any order, but over the past 12 years of my life, a few things have happened. I'm going to just give you 5 examples of what my life has been like. And then the movie actually breaks those.
Verge at that point says, well, you're not going to tell me anything that I haven't already heard.
Exactly. So obviously Verge has spoke to people like him before. But the movie is literally, he says 5 incidents over the course of the 12 years, and the movie literally is broken up into 5 different sections. So at various points in time, you know, he'll live through a particular set of scenes, a particular scenario, and then it'll go to the next thing. And there's title cards, you know, saying first incident, second, and so on. And it's through each of these that you learn a little bit more about the character. And right off the bat, after Uma Thurman's character's death, we go into this discussion about art and architecture in particular, and relating architecture to art. And Jack, obviously, he sees himself he fancies himself an architect, and he thinks that
Looks like George Costanza.
Yeah, and he thinks he's an artist. But we also know that he's got this very, very vicious dark side, and that's where you really get kind of into the meat of what the movie's really about, and the way it relates murder to art, or at least art in Jack's head.
And you learn, I mean, as you go through, to not go too deeply into the plot, you learn that he is a serial killer. I mean, he has... It's kind of funny, like I said, the parallels to Falling Down. It starts you out thinking that this is your protagonist, and then not to the extreme that, you know, whereas Falling Down was, it took half the movie before the character started to shift, at least in your mind.
When you finally realize that he is crazy, because you're not totally sure up until a certain point.
I mean, this starts out within the first few minutes, you realize, okay, this man is... I mean, he is deranged and very sadistic at points. Like, at some points, you're like, okay, no, this guy is sick.
He's completely ruthless.
Yes.
I mean, you're not going to feel sorry for this character at all.
No.
You're not going to relate to this character at all. But it's an interesting watch just to see, like, the inner workings of this depraved person's mind. You know,
and you think, like, going along, I remember you stated how he's kind of following along the paths of any known serial killer, whatnot.
Yeah, like, if you've, you know, how many of you serial killer lovers out there have, like, done your research or seen your YouTube videos about, like, Bundy or Dahmer or the Iceman particularly. In fact, there's a direct reference to
shows a picture of him.
Richard Kuklinski in the movie, where you have serial killers who are very methodical, very meticulous about making sure that they don't leave any traces behind at the crime scene, and he's like that. And there's actually a scene that could be construed as sort of comedy, but I know you said the scene gave you a lot of anxiety after the second murder.
You find out he has obsessive compulsive disorder,
yeah.
which I also do have, and watching him. He keeps going back into this house,
constantly going back to the crime scene.
Yeah.
Like he literally hears sirens coming, and he wants to get away, but he can't help it. He has to go back into the house.
There was still blood there, so he has to run back in and check and make sure everything was clean. He cleans the house over and over, and that gave me just the anxiety because I know how that feels to I have to keep checking the locks. I have to check all the switches on the oven, make sure everything's off. I go through this routine every day. It makes me late for work, and just to see him going through this, putting myself in that thought of there was no way.
Way higher stakes.
Yeah, there's no way I could see myself in this. But it's funny how you say he's following all these tropes, but then as the movie goes on, he's a completely different case. I mean, this is someone who is truly has another level of motivation.
Yeah. But and to get sort of to that point about him sort of following this sort of path that you see a lot of serial killers do is, they'll be very meticulous about the crime scene, making sure they leave no traces behind, and then at a certain point they get a little bit comfortable. They start to make mistakes and they get a little bit sloppy. They get a little bit too comfortable with themselves and everything. And part of it a lot of times too is they reach a point where they want to be caught. They want the grandeur of being infamous, having that famous name.
They want the fame, which is all throughout the movie. I honestly can't think of, except for in the end credits when you hear "Hit the Road, Jack."
Yeah.
The only other song I ever remember hearing throughout this movie is the David Bowie song "Fame."
Right. Yeah. I didn't even pay attention. I didn't even catch that.
Yeah. It's literally all through the movie. Every at the end of every incident, they start playing it. So he's getting closer to that fame in a way. I don't know if that's what it was.
The movie doesn't. The movie doesn't tend. He never at any point really starts to seek that fame. He never at any point tries to get caught. But he gets comfortable enough that the very scene we keep talking about when he's going back into the house, that the cops are coming, but he keeps going back in there to check the crime scene. At one point, when the cop finally does show up and wants to know why he's there, and they go into the house. I can't remember the specific reason why he goes into the house with the cop.
He just walks in behind.
He just kind of walks in there and he goes into the very room where he kills this woman. And he's getting very comfortable with what he's saying in front of the cop. After how very meticulous he was just being, now he's saying to the cop, I think something happened in this room, and I suggest that there be an investigation done, and you should check everything with a magnifying glass. So it's like he's challenging, the cops to go behind the crime scene and I dare you to find something,
So before we do get too deep into any real kind of spoilers, this is definitely... it's a very polarizing movie. After we watched it, we kind of just listened to a couple quick reviews or read through a couple reviews or watched them, seeing what people were saying about it.
Yeah, polarizing, very, very polarizing. I mean, there was reports of at film festivals when this movie got shown, there was everything from people screaming at the screen, booing, getting up and walking out. And then other people were just outright praising him. And
now, I guess we should go ahead and say that there apparently are multiple versions. There was an unrated version.
Yeah.
And we watched the rated R version. So I guess we saw the trimmed down, which from what I saw, apparently all these people that were booing it probably saw the unrated version that has quite a bit more...
It's the violence. The violence goes on a little longer, presumably, and so if you've heard other people talk about this movie, you might have heard them talk about the gore and just how violent and over the top it is. Well, we didn't see that version. We seen the rated R version, and in that version, there's nothing more gory or crazy than anything you've seen in
a Tarantino film.
Anything.
Yeah.
Even a Friday the 13th movie. Like, it doesn't really go that far, at least in the R-rated version. So I guess in the version we seen, they edited it down to chop a lot of the more gory parts of it out. So we can't speak to that. Whether it's gratuitous violence or if it really would have added to the story. That was kind of the argument going on between the people that loved and hated the movie. But in the R-rated version, which is, if you watch this movie on Hulu, that's what they have is the R-rated version. You're not going to see that over-the-top violence necessarily. But a lot of the violence, it's implied, and some of the implications are very, very dark. There's moments in here where he kills women, he kills children, and you don't see the graphic details of it, but that's what he's doing.
So as we've got to that point now, we will say spoilers from this point on. So if if this sounds like something, if you're interested in a very artistic look into the mind of a completely deranged serial killer, definitely check this movie out. I mean, this is
it's for sure recommend.
Yes, I highly recommend this. So I guess we can go ahead and get into some of the more deeper aspects as the symbolism.
Yeah, and that's a giant part of this movie. Because at the beginning of the review, I mentioned that art is really part of the plot here, and all the way through the movie, there's constant references to art. Everything in this movie is just a metaphor or a symbol for something else, and the movie does break some of this down for you. There are moments where it's a bit on the nose, and there are moments where it literally spells out the meaning in some places.
That is kind of nice in a way how it does it, though, because it starts out. It starts out to make you.
It doesn't feel like it's talking down to you.
Yeah, as the first incident takes place, or it's either right after the Uma Thurman thing or right into the first incident, I don't remember. They make a mention of, as he aspires to be an architect, he starts talking about the architecture of these Gothic cathedrals and all the artwork, paintings, sculptures, and he says how, what we see, like when you walk in, you think of these cathedrals, you think of, these arches, this beautiful artwork, but there's so much more stuff hidden way up in the corners that were only supposed to be seen by God, and not by the people, just the random people. It was like something special, something extra. So at the beginning, they actually spell out what some of these things are symbolizing, but there are things that are hidden and scattered throughout.
We kind of took that line to mean, okay, we're going to show you some of this very directly, but it's a way to challenge you or to let you know that there's deeper things to look for even underneath all of that. And I think that Jack, at the story at the beginning with Uma Thurman was an example of that. Because it's a Jack, okay, like his name is Jack, the movie's called The House Jack Built, so there's something there. He clearly wants you to notice that there's lots of close-up shots of the Jack on the ride to the garage and back.
And there's a broken Jack at that.
A broken Jack.
So that leads you to think, okay, after you've seen the entire movie, you can go back on that and reflect, think, well, does that mean that he's just broken as a person, or as he's talking about the architecture of these cathedrals, the arches, said, the much older ones were rounded arches until they realized if you built a pointed arch, it was cheaper material or you could use less material and you could build higher. So in a way, this Jack's purpose is to raise a car, but this Jack is broken. He keeps talking about building a house throughout this movie, yet his true house never gets built.
Yeah, he does have a dream of literally building a house, but he can't quite decide how he wants to go about it exactly. And at a point in the movie, that just kind of falls off, and you almost sort of forget about the fact that he was building a literal house. But then when you get to the end, that gets brought back up again, and of course it's a metaphor, like a lot of the things in the movie are the house that Jack built literally is a metaphorical one. Well, it is a metaphorical one, not a literal one.
Of all these very artsy movies that we've watched, symbolic movies, this one is one that I do understand a lot more of the references it's spelling out, and
lots of reference. You gotta know a bit about some things to get some of this movie.
And even though like some of it does, if you're not that well in the know on these things, then at least it does spell out some of these other things for you. Now, as I said, I could relate to the character for having OCD, but also he is a photographer, and that's something I've been very deep into for years.
We're going to mention the thing with the negatives.
Yes, into photography, where he talks about one of the beautiful things about it to him was how, especially in black and white photography.
Yeah, he said he didn't really care about the images as much as he did the negatives of the images, because when the light is blacked out in those negatives, it's almost like it shows the true darkness behind the light, or something.
When you look at a film negative, anything that there's light will show up black in the negative, or like even it showed fire, how the fire is inverted and you see just a blackness. Yeah. Black plasma coming out.
And it seems like every picture that he shows off throughout the movie is a negative. And of course, getting back to the whole him getting comfortable with his killing spree, I think there is a moment where he literally mails, I'm saying the word literally a lot, he actually mails the negatives to the police department.
Well, he mails the pictures to them and writes his name on it.
Writes his name, and it gives again back to the delusions of grandeur and the fame. So yeah, he gives himself a name, even like when he's mailing some of this evidence into the police department, just being very just cocky and sure of himself about it.
Mr. Sophistication.
Mr. Sophistication is the name he gives himself. That's what they publish in the newspapers, and he glues these things to like his mirror.
Your typical stereotypical serial killer.
Yeah, just
actions.
Yeah, of course, and narcissistic as hell. I mean, just every trope that a lot of serial killers tend to have.
And back onto photography. Something I noticed toward the end of the movie is how, again, as a photographer, it's always getting the shot right. And like there's this whole part in the film where he takes the body back to the scene of the crime because he wasn't satisfied.
Yeah, I forgot about
the pictures.
Yeah.
So, and at the very end, so toward the end of the movie, he has all these men lined up. He's going back to the German Nazi executions of trying to use one bullet to kill multiple people. So he lines them all in a row, has one full metal jacket rifle round in here, and he can't focus. So he has to back up, and he's lining up, trying to get the perfect shot again, which is something that photographers, filmmakers would know all too well about, is getting the perfect shot.
That's the thing. That's when it really started showing you that he's growing some balls, because he's so dedicated. Like, because he's used to taking pictures at the scene of the crime before he carries the bodies away, but he's so not satisfied with the pictures that he's willing to take the risk to throw these bodies back in the van. He keeps all of his bodies in a freezer, by the way, which I assume is just like something that he had rented out at some point.
He said he bought it.
Okay, so he buys it. He's got like this giant walk-in freezer that he hides all of his bodies in. But he's willing to take the risk of putting them back in the van, driving them all the way back to the scene of the crime, carrying them out in the open where someone could see, back into the place where he killed them, back into the room, just to take a better picture.
And his methods, for the murders become so much more like he takes time, so much more time on each one after it goes on, because if we're saying that Uma Thurman is his first kill, it's on impulse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I have to assume that probably wasn't his first kill.
Yeah, I would assume not. But
she said he killed 60 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which could be true or false. It's not really known.
Yeah.
And which, of course, he was, sadistic little kid, chopping up little baby ducks.
Yeah. I want to talk about that at some point too when we really delve into the symbolism parts.
So he, it starts out there. Then it starts out the lady from Men in Black and the bus driver from Forrest Gump. I can't think.
I'm not even
the
gonna.
actress's name.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I'm not even gonna try
I have no clue. But anyways, that's his next victim, and it's kind of like he's very awkward about even trying to get into the door, just to strangle this woman.
Yeah, like he's there to kill her, but he doesn't even seem to really know how he's going to go about it.
And then he works himself up to these elaborate schemes, like inviting these people out to target practice, to actually dating this girl.
Again, another thing that comes back to like a serial killer trope. He's a pathological liar, and he's willing to say anything to anybody to get them where he wants them to be so that he can kill them. Getting inside your house, getting you alone, whatever the situation may be. And like another one of these incidents, one of these blocks of the story, he takes this family who it's not quite made clear how he comes across them, but it's a mother and two sons, and he wants to take the kids hunting. And
no, he's not taking them hunting because he specifically tells them how hunting is sick.
Target practice is what. He takes the rifle out there. He was going to let them fire the rifle at a target, but he does tell them that he finds hunting repulsive. He doesn't like, which of course he's lying. And he goes on to talk about, he mentions that he hunts, but he just says he takes no pleasure in it.
He said he used to.
Yeah, he doesn't take pleasure in the actual killing. But then he goes on to explain to this little kid, how basically to track deer, and like if you come across like a group of deer, you typically like when you see like the fawns, the younger deer, in the presence of the mother.
You take down the younger first.
You take the younger one first. The theory being that
smaller.
Like if you were to kill the mother, then the other ones couldn't necessarily survive anyway without the mother. But like if you save the mother for last, it was. How did he explain that again?
Well, that is typical in hunting that if you were going for.
See, and I don't hunt, so I wouldn't know that.
Going for the weaker ones or the younger ones, because if you kill the mother, then the younger ones are going to run off possibly and they'll die anyways. But if you should kill the smaller one first,
and the mother gets away, then mother could continue to make more deer.
Yes.
Reproduce.
Yeah.
So anyway, he lines all this out, and literally again, there I go saying that word. It cuts right to immediately the very next scene with this mother and her two kids hiding behind a tree, or like some bushes or something, and that what he just explained to this kid, he was just explaining to this kid how he was going to kill that family, and of course he does it exactly how he says you should do it to the deer.
Yeah.
He knocks off the two kids first, saves the mother for last, and there you go.
Yeah, and I mean it's just as he kills these people, he likes to pose their bodies, and he calls the one.
It just made me think about what he does to the one son.
Yeah, he calls that one Grumpy.
Yeah,
and because one of the kids is just like constantly nagging, doesn't want to be there. So he makes the kid look happy because he said a good taxidermist can make a dead animal look alive again just by repositioning and all this stuff. And it's
by using like wire and stick to put them in a certain kind of position, and then freeze
before rigor mortis. And
before rigor mortis, before rigor mortis sets in, you use the sticks and the wires to place them in whatever position that he wants, and then he'll freeze them so that they're stuck that way, and then just remove the wires and the sticks, and there you go. You have whatever sick sort of pose he wants to leave him in. And what he does to that kid is creepy. It's creepy enough. It's creepy enough by itself.
That he kills a kid for it.
Yeah, but then like throughout the movie, there will be random shots where you'll see this taxidermy kid just sitting in the background somewhere. Just little reminders if you notice it.
This film was not for the faint of heart. I mean, now it's
going to bother certain people.
Yeah, if you are easily bothered by some of these aspects, then this is definitely not something you want.
I will say, if you're not comfortable with the sight or the idea of women, children, or animals being killed, you're going to be probably a little bit offended by this movie. And getting into the women part of it too, that's sort of what leads us to the end where, again, thinking back to the beginning, he's talking to Virgil through this, I guess it would really be...
Well, his name is, remember, his name is Virg.
I keep calling him...
It's a reference, of course, but his name is Virg.
We'll get to that when we talk about the end, but he calls him Virg, but it's essentially an internal monologue, I guess, of sorts, that you continue to hear as voiceover throughout the movie. And so... And as the movie goes on, like, in between some of these things that he's doing, some of these acts he's committing, as he's talking to Virg, he's trying to explain to Virg how what he did is art and how it relates to art. He's trying to make the argument that his murders are actually artistic in a way and are not repulsive and are not evil. And then Virg just spits it all back at him and twists everything back around on him and just knocks his theories down 100% of the time, basically. And then he even reaches a point where, after all you've seen him do, Virg says, like, what's your problem against women? Like, why do you only kill women? And he says, oh no, I kill men too. And then that gets us to the end where
you only mention the women, though.
Yeah, he says, I've killed men too. And so at the end of the movie, he goes out and kidnaps a bunch of guys and puts them in that sort of contraption that you were talking about, where they're all sort of like hands tied together, like they're sort of head to head. Their chins are like sort of on top of this board, and the idea is that he's going to like shoot one full metal jacket round, and it'll go through all of their heads. Yeah. And
which I found it kind of funny is how the last guy, they calls him the military man. He's saying, I have a full metal jacket bullet. This is capable of going through all of your heads. Well, then this military man says, no, that's not a full metal jacket. I'm in the military. I know that's a hunting round. Like, you're right. So literally, if he wouldn't have said anything, it would have just killed him, and probably the rest would have lived. But now he goes out and ruins it for all.
Oh, he would have killed him anyway, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that gets us to the point where, and we're never sure exactly how it happens, but the cops do start to pick up on what's going on. And again, it's never quite told to us like what clues they're actually gathering and how they're figuring this out.
But, well, I mean, he's sending them all his stuff.
Yeah, but they don't know it's him.
Well, and even at the end, they don't know that either. It's because, remember, his friend thinks he was a robber.
That's true. Yeah, and I'm not sure where that came into play or why, but for whatever reason, once he starts to realize that the cops are on his trail, he realizes that they think he's robbed a bank or something like that.
Or he's robbed people.
Or robbed people or whatever. But anyway, as he goes out to try to find an actual Full Metal Jacket bullet, he goes back to the gun shop that he says he's always bought his guns and ammunition from. And for whatever reason... You never meet this character until now, but for whatever reason, the gun shop owner is acting very strange, very weird, asking to see his receipt for the bullets that he's bringing back, asking to see his driver's license, just giving him a hard time about it. And so okay, something's a little bit weird.
Yeah, they're all on to him at this point.
Yeah, then he meets another friend later, like as he's walking down the road. He ends up crashing his van, walking down the road a little further, and coming across this mobile home. Who he apparently knows the guy that lives there. So he goes in there to talk to him, and of course that guy's caught wind of him, and that's when he says, you've robbed these people. And he attempts to hold Jack at gunpoint until the police get there, but of course Jack kills him too.
Through more manipulation.
Yeah, through more, and this guy is a master manipulator. I mean, there's almost nobody that he kills in this movie where leading up to it he doesn't like just mess with their mind to make them feel comfortable enough to make them trust him. And it's like once he knows he has their trust, he waits for that one vulnerable moment and kills them. But he turns the tables on that guy and gets back to the freezer to try to get his one magic shot there. Yeah, and there's another section of the movie, jumping back a little bit. He mentioned earlier about this guy having a girlfriend, and yeah, he's a master manipulator. So at certain points, he's able to coax a family to go out into the woods with him, and at some point was able to, he was able to coax a woman into making her think that he was a police officer so that he could get into the house to kill her. And
he wasn't successful at that though. He Totally his insurance.
Yeah, he ended up having to say he was. Either way, he got.
That's when he was still bad. Like he was.
Yeah.
He was really screwing the stories up.
Yeah, but he got in there. Either way, he's a manipulator, and he was able apparently to convince this woman to be his girlfriend, and you just see like just one little snippet of this relationship.
Just cutting her down to nothing all the time.
Talks to her like absolute trash, and once it gets to the point where she kind of knows that he's going to kill her, I think she really starts to get scared. She starts.
And that's one of the most intense scenes in the movie when she thinks he's passed out on the couch, and she's trying to get to the door, and like it just slowly not trying to wake him back up, but then it cuts back and he's already standing there.
He's already standing there behind her, watching her try to leave. And she starts to scream for help, and then he screams with her, and he's like, go ahead, like, scream louder, and then, well, let's try the window. So he goes over to the window, opens the window, he's like, go ahead, scream. And she makes an attempt to scream for help, and I think at this point the movie's trying to create a dialogue about sort of I guess just the coldness of the world, and I think like the character of Jack feels like a product of that, and I think in a sense that's why he doesn't necessarily feel guilt for what he does. He sees that's why he sees it like as an artistic thing. He doesn't feel any sympathy for the world, and it is a cold place, and it's sort of like echoed in that scene where she's hanging her head out the window, screaming for help. Clearly, plenty of people outside. There's neighbors around. There's cars driving by. There's people on the street, and nobody pays any attention. And he goes, see. You know, like the world's not going to help you.
It's just like
no one cares.
It's like people say, you know, if you're being attacked on the street, don't yell for help.
Yeah.
Yell fire.
Because people will, yeah.
If it move, then because if it's something going to harm themselves, then it's going to get their attention. But yelling help, people just, a lot of people just don't care.
Or they'll look the other way. But yeah, there's honestly like this movie's 2.5 hours long. And I hope we've given the best plot synopsis that we can. There's plenty of things throughout the movie that we could mention, but you know, we both recommend that everybody go out and see it for themselves and gather their own opinions. But anyway, with that being said, getting into the ending of this movie.
So naturally, as we're talking about this final shot, you know, he's lining up to get this perfect shot to kill all these men. That's when you finally actually meet Verge instead of just being this voice in the background. And this is when
they set that up fairly nicely too, because they mentioned even early on in the movie that there's a door within this walk-in freezer that he owns that he, for whatever reason, has never been able to get open.
Yeah, and so that's when he finally breaks it open and is able to back up. Mm-hmm. Well, so this is when things really get to the point where you think, okay, I'm going to have to go back and watch this movie again.
I was already thinking it by then, but that's when it really kicks in. Yeah.
So early in the movie, there's this after where he kills the Forrest Gump bus driver lady, and you know it's pretty funny scene where he's driving away to get away quick. He just had to tie the body bag onto the back of his van. Yeah. Drives home, leaves this big bloody trail, but a huge rainstorm.
Lo and behold, like the hardest rainstorm ever just comes down and washes all that evidence away.
And he says, like, you know, I've never been punished for all the things I've done. I've never been caught. Yeah. And he's like, at that point, it's like there was a higher power, someone watching over me. Yeah. Well, when you meet Verge, he says, I've been here. I've been with you all along, you just never noticed me. And it cuts back to these scenes throughout the movie that you see him in the background. Now, I did actually notice early on with that same woman, when he killed her and he's taking this, you know, he's taking his picture, making his art. She's sitting in this chair and there's a window behind her, the moon's in the window. You can see something in the bottom pane of the window, and I noticed that going through the beginning. I'm like, okay, I feel like this might come into play later. Now, I don't remember ever seeing him again throughout the rest, which again, it could be other scenes that were cut out in the R-rated version. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true too. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, but so it shows that he was there throughout the entire movie watching all these things. And then he essentially asks him about the house he never built. Well, he says, well, you have...
Yeah, so I thought you were building a house. What happened to that?
Yeah, he said, well, you have the matter now. You have the matter. Because he said it was like conscience, or conscious.
It was, he said like you've been looking, this whole time you've been looking for the right materials.
Yeah. And then, so he builds this house out of these bodies. Now, I don't know what that was really supposed to symbolize.
I think it just, it's a metaphor for... sort of like his body of work, where like he fancied himself an architect and his goal was to build this house, but really his ultimate destiny was his art that he was creating through murder, not the literal building of brick and mortar's house. So I think building the house out of the bodies was just that ultimate metaphor of like, this is actually his work. This is what he's actually been reaching towards.
So up until this point, everything has been fairly, I mean, there's quite a few, like, just images and other footage just kind of imposed into the film.
Yeah.
But here's when things really just take a far left turn.
Yeah.
Now, so Verge then helps him escape from the police breaking in.
Yeah, because the police, again, as we mentioned, the police were on to him. He had to kill a couple people, but once he's back to the freezer trying to kill these group of guys, and opens this door he's never been able to be opened, he builds this house of bodies inside of that room when he meets Virgil, or, well, Verge for now. But the cops are breaking in, about to catch him, and so Verge just happens to be there to save him, presumably yet again, like he may have been doing all the other times. And they go down into this hole,
into the sewer system, and this is
now the movie's different.
Yeah, and this is actually where you realize this is technically where the movie begins, because they start having their dialogue now,
the voiceover, the internal monologue, as I would like to call it, that you hear all throughout the movie. Those things start to be repeated, so now you realize, okay, everything I've heard up until now was part of this conversation.
Yeah. And there's some insane imagery in this part. It almost lost me at one point. Like, there's this one shot where they're just floating in these bubbles, and I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, Princess Leia style.
Yeah, but it just went some crazy territory, but then it gets back to this reality. I mean, it almost, at one point, it looks like a found footage film where they're going through these dark crevices underground.
Yeah.
And then it brings us into the little more obvious symbolism of Dante's Inferno, going through the 9 circles of hell. And
of course, Virgil.
Yes, is symbolic for Virgil.
Yeah.
Now, this is where, like, now if you don't really know about all these, know anything about the lore of Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were getting at earlier too, and this has happened in some of the other films like this that we've watched. They make a lot of references to a lot of things in history and literature and things like that, and you're sort of expected to know some of that going in. And if you're not familiar with Dante's Inferno at all, the ending of this movie is going to completely confuse you. Completely. Now,
because, as if you know anything about the 9 circles, is like, the violent acts, which would be like murder and all that, that's only, I think, the 7th level. And then there's 2 more levels below. The lowest one is treachery.
Yeah.
And so Verge takes him to this lower level and says, like, well, this isn't actually where you're going. You're going a couple circles higher. I just wanted to show you all this because, as you've told me in your stories, you wanted to see everything.
Yeah.
And there's this broken bridge, and he said there used to be a bridge that would, because he asked, where does that go? He said, takes you out of hell and out and away. Where he says there used to be a bridge, but that was before my time. That's going to some biblical references of when, after Jesus was crucified, going down into hell and tearing up the barrier between hell and Abraham's bosom, and where at that time no one was in heaven, took all the saints from the paradise side of hell up into heaven. But then as Jesus came down, tore apart the bridge, now it's only hell down there.
Yeah, to really get this movie, I mean, particularly like literature, maybe not religion so much, but if you know a little bit about religion, it's definitely not going to hurt going into this movie, and just art. I mean, this movie's just throwing serial killers even. I mean, this movie's just throwing references at you that like you really sort of need to understand, or you will be totally lost.
But yeah, I mean, all the stuff in the final scene, I mean, I think it is. That's probably my favorite part of the entire movie. This
it's pretty brilliant.
Yeah, all the symbolism here, and how they depict hell. I mean, it looks like this truly terrifying thing.
The sound is what I found the most terrifying, because like as they go into hell, you can hear like this high-pitched sort of siren, almost sort of sound.
Just like a sine wave.
Yeah, and Jack asks him, what is that noise? And Virgil tells him that's just out of all the centuries, the millions and millions of souls that have came down here, when they all scream in agony, it will create this sort of noise, and like that's like what you're literally hearing, the millions of souls.
Because there was there's a video that's went around YouTube for a while now about these people who dug into like the Arctic core, dug really deep into the earth, put a microphone down there, and they heard like it's just the screeching sounds.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what he was playing on or not, but it made me think of that.
Yeah, and you can YouTube that. I mean, I don't know the validity of it, but there's stuff out there if you're interested in that sort of thing. But it even shows footage too. Like the movie itself shows footage of guys digging these holes and talking about trying to get to hell and the noises that they heard. And he tells Jack, that's what these noises are. That's what you're hearing. And it gets a little bit louder as they go down. And just like hearing that and like knowing that, like that was just creepy to me.
And of course he tries to escape. He gets this thought that, okay, I can climb to the other side over and get to the bridge and get out. So he'd take his chance, but of course falls into the lake of fire.
Yeah, and that's the end of the movie.
But it's, I mean,
which is where he belongs, in that lake of fire. Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, but there's so much, like I said, if we were to watch this again right now, I mean, I know we'd be picking up on all these other things.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't have till 5 in the morning to be watching this again.
Oh, dude, I couldn't stay. This is a movie I could not watch twice in one day.
No.
I don't even know if I could watch it twice in the same week. I would need a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I need some buffer time.
Then I'd come back and watch it again. It is a movie I'd watch again just for the sake of trying to understand it better. I don't know if I would watch it again or watch it multiple times just out of the enjoyment of it.
As I said, this movie is so polarizing. Like, so many people do not like this director because they say he's very pretentious. Like, he's just shoving stuff into this movie. He's like, look what I'm doing. See what I can get away with.
Yeah, particular story elements, references, just the general direction. And
kind of the same stuff they say about Tarantino, about, like, just this unneeded violence and gore.
Yeah.
And just, like, all the stuff he shoves in there.
How they'll admit that a filmmaker's talented, but they... they say that it's the ego that they have when they make these certain movies with all this like extra added artsy sorts of stuff, or even violence, where people will make the argument that like you're just basically trying to show off. Like, you're not trying to make a movie for the movie's sake. You're trying to make a movie because your ego.
Which is this isn't my own original thought. I wish it was, but I said we did see it. We looked at a couple thoughts on this movie before we went to the review. I don't remember who it was that said this now, but one reviewer said this movie is the perfect symbolism for that, just the perfect analogy for, all throughout this movie, Jack is just doing these grotesque acts of, just murder, all this, and setting up these pictures, these poses, just gruesome depictions, and he says this is art, this is beauty. Where Verge is criticizing him through the entire thing, like, no, this is just...
Yeah, you're actually just a crazy serial killer.
Yeah,
that's all there is to
it. You're just trying to defend your unmorality with, calling it art.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel like, again, this isn't my own thought. This was what another reviewer said. That's what this movie's doing. Showing that, comparing it to the director. So yeah, he said that this is just, the perfect comparison for, these people say this director is just, just so full of himself. He'll put all this stuff into a movie and call it art, which is exactly what's going on in this movie.
Yeah.
He's just doing all these wicked acts, calling it art. Like, okay, where's the line between, okay, yeah, this is still considered art, and no, you're just seeing what you can get away with.
And Verge is the voice of reason, and Verge is the character that, even though you don't see him until the end, that's sort of your guide through the movie. That's who you relate to, because you see him doing these things. You see Jack doing the things he's doing, and you hear the way he's trying to relate it to art, and the way he's trying to justify. And then when you hear Verge shoot that down, that's you as the audience member. Like, no, like you're just a psychopath. You're not an artist.
Yeah. And anywhere in this movie, like you just cannot, unless there's a few messed up people out there. There's no way you're going to relate to Jack and actually feel for him, be on his side. Like, at no point do you ever think, yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, kind of once he kills his first victim, from that point on, you're not on his side.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, once after he kills Uma Thurman, you're still kind of on his side at that point.
Yeah, a little bit. She was a bit of a bitch.
Yeah. I like Uma Thurman, but in her character.
Yeah, Uma Thurman wasn't. Uma Thurman's not a bitch. Uma Thurman's cool, but
yeah.
Uma Thurman's character in that movie is bitchy.
Yeah, you can see why anyone would kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to like some of the things that it actually explains and guides you through is just talking about this this analogy of streetlights, walking under streetlights, how your shadow, as you're walking upon one, your shadow's like very, very large behind you, but it's very thin. But the closer you get to the streetlight, the more dense it gets, but very small. Mm-hmm. Well, then as you start walking between two, you have two shadows at that point, and he's going on saying like that's how he felt between the kills. How he would have just this joy in front of him, and also this pain creeping up behind him.
The further he gets away from that light, So he's got to get to a new light to feel right again, and the next kill is that next street light. That's a really unique analogy, and I think that's really cool. And it's not an example of him trying to justify himself in that instance. It's more or less just him talking about how he feels, how the killing makes him feel. And then Verge even tells him, but you're a murderer. The thing you just described could apply to an alcoholic, a drug addict, or anything else. Again, just sort of shutting Jack down until listen, that's a creative analogy, but you're not special.
Yeah.
You are a killer. And Jack says something back to that, and I'll be honest, I can't remember what it is, but still, that was a really unique analogy. And just
there's so much internal dialogue in this that that's not the most important parts of the movie. Now, if you really want to understand a lot of the symbolism in it, you do need to listen to what all they're saying, but if you should kind of zone out during some of it, you're not really going to miss a whole lot of key elements.
All right. So yeah, kind of like I mentioned earlier, I like this movie a lot, and I would recommend anybody that's sort of into this kind of movie, if you like sort of artsy movie, if you can stand to watch a long movie, this thing's 2.5 hours long. And it is slow. There's not a lot of action. There's not a lot going on. It's definitely it's a slow burn, and it's sort of one of those movies that you have to appreciate on that level. And I know not everybody's into that, but we've reviewed a few movies like that up until this point. If you heard us talk about The Lighthouse or Hereditary, it's another one of those long movies that is very heavy on just the art of storytelling, the art of cinema, and the different sort of things you can do with it. It's a deep movie. So that being said, I think it's worth a watch. It's worth a couple watches, especially just to go back to pick up on more each time. But it's not something that I would revisit over time just for enjoyment's sake.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah, my main problems with the film were The length for one. Like, I mean, it.
Yeah, that's
2.5 hours. Sometimes a 2.5 hour movie doesn't feel like it at all. This one felt like it because we paused it a couple times.
Yeah.
And we're like, wow, there's still like we paused it once and like we're not even halfway through this movie.
Yeah, and now I won't say it's boring, but
no, it's not.
It's not boring, but it does kind of reach moments where it's like, you know, we could move a little faster here.
Because in each of your 5 incidents, you have a climax per incident.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of everything in between is like, you know, it's again, it's not bad, it's not boring. It's just it's a very slow burn.
Yeah,
very slow burn to get to some of these things.
Yeah, you got to be patient with it. I will say, put it this way: if you liked The Lighthouse and if you liked Hereditary, I think you'll like this.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are just strongly against this movie, strongly oppose it.
Seems to be mostly the violence, though. A lot of
again, now
with the violence, which we didn't see.
Yeah, maybe it was in that other version. Now, if you're going to watch the rated R version, we did. I highly recommend it. I mean, this is
it's not. The rated R version doesn't really have that much violence. So, like, if you can track down the unrated version, which actually the unrated version is on YouTube for rent. So if you wanted to watch that and come back and let us know about some of the gory details that were in there that we didn't talk about because we didn't see it, then yeah, I'm all for hearing about it.
And definitely watch it with somebody because this is a movie you're going to want to discuss afterwards.
Yeah, like, it's gonna want to make you talk.
Yeah, we talk. I mean, before we even started filming, we were talking for a good 20 minutes or so, and just trying to like really get our thoughts together on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess. Moving into a final rating here, again, aside from the length and some of the slow burn, I actually very much enjoyed this movie. It was very captivating and kept my interest peaked throughout the entire movie, really.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it a good, I'm going to give it a good 7.5 out of 10.
That's about where I'm going to land, too. I know it seems like we agree on all our ratings, but that just happens to be the case. I'm going to give it a... Again, the length was a problem for me. I don't think it has a lot of rewatchability value other than just going back to pick up on more things.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, it's not something that you're gonna just like ever like want to just rewatch for enjoyment's sake necessarily. So I don't want to put it too high up there. Like say for a Lighthouse, for example, it's a very similar sort of movie, but I would go back and rewatch the Lighthouse a bunch of times. This I wouldn't. I would, but I really appreciate it. I thought it was a great, well-made movie. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5.
Yeah, I would. If I don't remember what I gave Hereditary really, but I would give this a somewhere around a point below the Lighthouse, but a point above Hereditary.
Yeah, I would say
I enjoyed this more than Hereditary.
I liked it more than Hereditary, but I didn't like it as much as The Lighthouse.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, that's the way I felt about it exactly. But I think the next movie we're going to do is Birdman. I don't know how well you can see it, starring Michael Keaton, which is a movie that I watched back in film school. And I remember at the time it came out, it had a lot of high praise. That's why our professor showed it to us. But I'll be honest, that was about 4 years ago, and I don't remember much of anything about it. And I think I slept through a lot.
I know a little bit about it. I know the plot, but I've never seen it. So, yeah, that'll definitely be something interesting.
You can thank Marshall Lawless for that pick because that was his recommendation. So I guess that's the next one we'll do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, again, this is definitely a film. If you're into this kind of movie, definitely want to check this one out. Stay tuned for more Midnite Movie Reviews. Of course, check out my other series, On the Road with Vincent. I will have a couple episodes very soon featuring Raven Shadow here, and of course the Smoking Hour with Stephen Midnight.
I don't like that guy.
Yeah, I don't care much for him neither. He's not going to watch this video.
Our videos are better.
Yeah, he's not going to watch this video, so
tell him I
this.
said that.
Yeah, he'll never hear this.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all again next time.